About a week and a half ago, I had car trouble that I had to call the tow truck and have him tow my car to our mechanic. And when he got there and loaded my car, he was a fairly young driver. He said, "You can ride in the cab with me." So I clambered into the cab with him. We took off down the 10, headed toward the mechanic. I was curious how much he had seen since he hadn't been around all that long. I said, "Do you see many really bad accidents?" He said, "Well, on surface streets, not really, not that bad." I said, "How about here on the 10 freeway?" "Oh, yeah, we see bad ones here, bad ones." He said, "In fact, just recently, accident, fire truck stopped, man came barreling in, just barreled into the fire truck. Fatality." I said, "What do you think happened?" He said, "Just driving too fast." So what do you think caused that? He gave me one word, just one word that I've been thinking about since then. Distracted. Distracted. It's not just drivers. It's pedestrians. They did a study at actually two very busy intersections in Vancouver, using different types of video equipment, different types of researchers keeping track of things. What they determined at the end of the study, they said it's not the drivers that are distracted as much as it is the pedestrians. The pedestrians on their devices walk into the traffic without even looking. They might be very close to a car that's dangerous and not change direction. It's the pedestrians. I want to tell you something, especially if you're new in Loma Linda. This roadway right out here, just across the street, you take your life in your hands. Be sure you're paying attention, because distractions can be very, very difficult and even deadly. Distractions. But it's not just distractions in driving or in walking. It's distractions everywhere we look. They're all over, for example, the world of sports. In sports, they've elevated it to an art form, to try to distract. For example, Lance Stevenson, alongside LeBron James, waiting for the play to begin, and Lance Stevenson trying to blow in LeBron's ear. And LeBron's like, distract him. Or Arizona pitcher J.J. Putz, just before he pitches, there comes out of the stands what can best be described as a demented cow moo. And it threw him off and the pitch was errant. Or even Rafael Nadal in a championship series got distracted by a pretty ball girl. He managed to come back and still win, but the announcer said he's distracted. My daughter, Miranda, and I, some years ago, were sitting watching a tennis match, women's tennis match, and we noticed that at one of the players, every time the volley ended, she'd say, "Come on!" It was just, "Come on, come on." Pretty soon, Miranda and I were mimicking her, "Come on!" And thinking, what in the world is she doing? Well, I read something that explained it. And I realized it was something more than just this particular tennis pro who was doing it. Matt Halpert, writing in Bleacher Report, writes this: "The infamous tennis grunt," okay? "The infamous tennis grunt is more than just an instinctual release of passion and tension. The grunt is, in fact, a carefully thought out, diligently practiced technique used frequently among the women's tennis circuit as a form of distraction. The grunting epidemic has gotten so out of hand that the Women's Tennis Association is now planning to monitor noise level during matches as a way of regulating the volume of the grunts." This is serious. According to Tim Newcomb of Time magazine no less, these grunts, and this now is a quote from Tim Newcomb, "These grunts have been measured at 101 decibels, on par with a chainsaw or a motorcycle, and a level at which sustained exposure can cause hearing loss." Grunting, shouting, "Come on," in an attempt to distract your opponent. No matter where we go in life, Distractions are compelling. They tend to draw us off what really matters. Just think of the last time you sat down to write a paper on your computer, you sat down to study, and your phone's buzzing in your pocket, somebody's walking by, and pretty soon you find out, I can't stay focused on this because there are so many sources of distraction. The poet laureate at one point in time for the United States, Billy Collins. The poet laureate is appointed, by the way, by the Librarian of Congress with the express purpose to encourage people to read more and hoping to get people to fall in love with poetry. That's what the poet laureate does. So the poet laureate was interviewed by the New York Times Book Review. One of the questions that was asked was, how has your writing changed? How has it changed? This is how Collins responded. The internet asks us to speed up. Poetry invites us to slow down. I write with pencil and paper, then use the computer only as a fancy typewriter. So no change really, except in the internet's role as the most persistent distraction in human history. Now think about that. Did you catch that last line? As the most persistent distraction in human history. You know, there are dates in history that we can point to as a date when the world changed. That date right there, the world changed. Somewhere in the year 1450, the world changed when Gutenberg introduced the movable printing press. The world changed. Somewhere toward the late 17th, early 18th century, Industrial Revolution, all the advances, the world changed. November 9, 1989, that one day, the world changed. That was the day the Berlin Wall fell. We can point at times to those specific, either brief time periods or even dates when the world actually changed. One of those dates, June 29, 2007. That was a day the world changed. We knew the change was coming a bit before that, about 3 weeks before that, because it had been announced. It had been introduced. But on June 29, 2007, a gentleman named Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone. Now, there had been certain versions of smartphones before that, but often they were accompanied by a big carrying case and a huge thing you held up against your ear. It was, you wouldn't be interested in that. But the iPhone came along. A friend of mine, Melinda Hebel, loaned me. She has an original iPhone, first iPhone. Well, not the first one. Even Melinda couldn't get that, but the first generation of iPhone. And here it is. This is it. So Steve Jobs said, I am now going to place in the palm, and literally in the palm of your hand, something that will give you immediate and direct access to the most persistently distracting reality in human history. It's right there in the palm of your hand. And the world changed. It changed. Now you say, well, that's a bit overstated, Randy. The world? I would argue the world. We've had the privilege of traveling some. I've shared this with some of you, but I'll tell you this. We were on a bus driving through what to us was kind of a backwater town. To them it wasn't. It was their life, their world. But we were from around the globe. We were driving through a backwater town in Upper Egypt. It's a little town. I'm sitting there looking out the window of the bus. I see this ramshackle cottage. And on the front porch are two rickety chairs and two old guys. And they're a bit hunched over and they're going. And I'm like, good heavens, the world has changed. What are you doing on there? Social media, finding the Cowboys scores, shopping on Amazon. What are you doing on there? In the middle of Egypt, the world changed. And Steve Jobs, it was his goal to put it in the palm of your hand. Now, let me tell you this. This has done incredible good. Let me just be very clear about that. The amount of good that this has done is hard to measure. It's hard to list. I personally, most of the time, not always, but most of the time, would never want to go back to a pre-iPhone world. Just think of all it accomplishes. The business we can conduct, the communication we can have, the news that we can find, the ability to follow a favorite sports team, all the kinds of things, staying in touch with family, with friends. It does incredible good. So I'm not here to put this down and throw shade all over it, except to say that right behind all the good comes incredible danger. Danger. Over this coming few weeks, we'll talk about some of that. The danger comes in scientists saying this little, well, it's not so little anymore, but this small device can rewire your brain. It has changed the world. So what are the distractions? What are we doing on here? You can answer that better than I, certainly. Social media is way up there. Following people, way up there. Shopping, checking sports, news, that's a big one. I like to stay up on the news, but one of the things that I've realized is that many times after I finish reading news and listening to news stories and looking at, and I put my phone down, I think, I feel this tremendous chaos and cacophony inside my soul. Why did I do that? In the middle of all that, then, comes an invitation. Simple invitation that sounds like this. May I have your attention, please? And today, this week, that invitation, that question is coming from the voice of God. In coming weeks, it will come from other sources. But today, God is the one asking, may I have your attention, please? He's asking it in the 46th Psalm. We're going to look at Psalm 46. Psalm 46 was the second Psalm I memorized. Second. So take 46, divide it by 2, 23. Psalm 23 was the first Psalm. I remember Psalm 46 because I was in 5th grade. We were in Mrs. Simmons' classroom. Mrs. Simmons, to us, was a bit of an older, rather rotund woman with a strong voice. And she taught us Psalm 46. And she did it by both clapping her hands and stomping her feet. She would stand up and say, okay, children, let's start. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. And we would follow along with her cadence, memorizing Psalm 46. I can't even begin to read Psalm 46 without going back to that 5th grade classroom and Mrs. Simmons. Thank you, boy. She could have given the sons of Korah a lesson on how to really teach this psalm. But Psalm 46, that's where we're going. But I want to say 3 things before we read it. 3 things to watch for. Number 1. Watch for the fact that the psalm has 3 stanzas. It's easy to identify the stanzas because each stanza is followed by a word. It's a Hebrew word, probably a musical term or a liturgical term. Hebrew scholars aren't 100% certain how to translate it. They have a sense of what it means, but it's hard to translate it in one word, so they typically transliterate it. So in many Bibles, it appears as Selah. You've seen that, Selah. We're going to read from the New Living Translation today. The New Living Translation renders it simply as interlude. So watch for that because we'll come back to that. That's the first thing. Second thing, watch for verse 10. Something happens in verse 10 that's rather unusual in the Psalms. You see, the Psalms are people's prayers to God, people's praise of God, people's questions to God, people's anger at God. In other words, the Psalms are the words of the people to God. It's not very often that God breaks in and says something directly in the Psalms. He does so in verse 10. So watch for verse 10. And then finally, the third reality I want you to watch for is the tenor, the climate, the context of the Psalm. It's rough. Dramatic things are happening, whether or not they are literal or metaphorical. Dramatic things are unfolding. So Psalm 46, in memory of Mrs. Simmons, here we go. God is our refuge and strength, always ready to help in times of trouble. So we will not fear when earthquakes come and the mountains crumble into the sea. Let the oceans roar and foam. Let the mountains tremble as the waters surge. Interlude. A river brings joy to the city of God, the sacred home of the Most High. God dwells in that city. It cannot be destroyed. From the very break of day, God will protect it. The nations are in chaos. Their kingdoms crumble. God's voice thunders. The earth melts. The Lord of heaven's armies is here among us. The God of Israel is our fortress. Interlude. Come, see the glorious works of the Lord. See how he brings destruction upon the world. He causes wars to end throughout the earth. He breaks the bow and snaps the spear. He burns the shields with fire. Verse 10, be still and know that I am God. I will be honored by every nation. I will be honored throughout the world. The Lord of heaven's army is here among us. The God of Israel is our fortress. Interlude. Chaotic, cacophonous, cataclysmic. That's the tenor of the psalm. I mean, we're talking about both natural disasters and political upheavals. You heard the language there. Earthquakes come, mountains crumble, oceans roar and foam, mountains tremble. Cataclysmic natural disasters and destruction. You know what happens when natural disasters occurs. All of our attention goes there. Our focus, whatever else we were focused on before, is there. Did you feel the earthquake this last week? A lot of people felt it. I didn't. I was at the office. I was bending over to get something. I thought, wow, something happened. I thought it was a sermon idea. But anyway, something happened. Thought, I don't know what that was. And I went about my work, and suddenly my phone's blowing up, and I'm looking, and everybody's texting. Did you feel it? Where was it based? How strong was it? Was there any damage? I'm thinking, what was that? It was an earthquake. And what happens is everybody's attention goes right there. So in the psalm, you have cataclysmic natural upheavals. So naturally, people's hearts are failing them, and their focus is on that. What do we do to protect ourselves? But that's not all. If you continued to listen in the psalm, you saw what else happened in the political world. Nations in chaos, kingdoms crumbling, wars breaking out, weapons flashing. So now you have political turmoil, political chaos that is erupting on every front. And once again, all our focus goes there. I mean, come on. Think of where we are today. You know what the conversations are. What did Trump say now? What are the Democrats doing now? And a fight erupts from both fronts on both sides, and all of our focus centers in on that. That's the context, that's the reality of what's happening in the psalm. If there is ever a psalm that is relevant to our day and time, certainly this must be it. In the middle of all of that, the natural disasters, the political turmoil, comes a divine invitation. May I have your attention, please? And it comes in verse 10. Notice that verse again. Be still and know that I am God. I will be honored by every nation. I will be honored throughout the world. Be still. Know that I'm God. Now, we have typically read that verse devotionally. It's a beautiful verse. Be still. Be quiet. Slow down. Go into your prayer closet. Open your heart. Still your mind. Read your Bible. Listen to the voice of God. Be still and know that I am God. When I was a young adult, like many of you are, there was a song that addressed this. I was thinking about it this last week. There is a quiet place, far from the rapid pace, where God can soothe my troubled mind. Sheltered by tree and flower, there in my quiet hour with Him, my cares are left behind. Whether a garden small or on a mountain tall, new strength and courage there I find. Then from this quiet place, I go prepared to face a new day with love for all mankind. Now, I realized this last week. The fact that I can remember the words of a song that I haven't heard in, a little while, speaks to the impact it had on me. Be still. It's beautiful. It's biblical. But it's not what this psalm is saying. Oh, it's included in that. Certainly, it includes those kinds of disciplines of stilling our minds and finding a quiet place. It includes that, but that's not primarily what this psalm is saying. We know that because of the language used. Be still. In this psalm, in the Hebrew, is not a devotional word. It is a word that comes out of warfare. Out of warfare. In fact, listen to two Hebrew scholars as they write about ways this word gets translated. Bratcher and Rayburn say, the Hebrew verb means to cease, be inactive. Different versions render this differently. Surrender, stop, desist, drop your weapons, make peace. Get the picture. You have a reality where in the natural world there are forces at work that no matter how much we may fight them, we will never defeat. And in the political arena, there are battles being waged that no matter how much you and I may want to, we can never win them. So the psalmist is speaking about a world that is overwhelmed with catastrophe, with chaos, with calamity, with cataclysms, a world in which we've got to fight to stay alive and fight to try to survive. And in that world where our focus is on all of those things and often on those things through this, suddenly the voice of God speaks and He says, stop, stop, stop. Drop your weapons. Stop fighting. This is a war you will never win. Stop fighting. And know that I am God. That there's somebody bigger and better and bolder and braver above and beyond us. Stop fighting. Surrender. I mean, what does that mean? When I was a chaplaincy student here at the medical center in Loma Linda years ago, I went to a stress seminar, neighboring church. I don't know what I was doing at a stress seminar in those days. I didn't even know what work was at that time. I remember going to my chaplain supervisor at one point, saying, I'm hoping to get some support. Went in and said, I'm really stressed out. Told him I'm doing this, that, and I'm really stressed out. He looked at me and says, young man like you needs some stress. Okay, I never did that again. So I get to the stress seminar. And the facilitator, the teacher, stands up and says, a lot of you are stressed out because you keep trying to fix problems and fight battles that don't belong to you. All right, that sounds good, but I have no idea where to go with that. And then she said, here's how you know if a problem, an issue, a battle belongs to you. Ask yourself the question, can I fix it? Do I have the solution? She said, if your answer is yes, then fix it and stop bellyaching. Stop worrying about it. If you could fix it, fix it. End of issue. And if you can't fix it, it's not your problem. The problem belongs to someone who can. So stop fighting battles that aren't yours, worrying about problems that aren't yours, and trying to fix issues that aren't yours. If you don't have the solution, it's not your problem. And the psalmist says, amen. You know whose problem this is? God's. Not all of it. We all have our role to play. But be clear that in the cacophony of life, the truly big issues, there comes a time when we have to surrender our weapons and stop fighting and be still and know who God is. That's exactly what the psalmist is driving us toward. Now remember I mentioned that word Selah or interlude. It's an important word. For this reason, it comes at the end of each of the three stanzas. At the heart of each stanza is the thought with which the psalm begins. God is our refuge and strength. In some form, that key theme is repeated in each stanza. In the middle of all the problems, that is repeated. And then you come to the end of the stanza, and there's that word, Selah. There's a Bible called the Amplified Bible. The Amplified Bible is great to get a deeper idea of what some of the meanings of words are, because at key words, it will, in brackets, put in some more language to help you understand what that word is. Here is how the Amplified Bible renders Selah in this psalm. Selah, pause and think calmly of that. Pause and think calmly of that. So the ground shakes beneath our feet. The fear rises in our hearts. God is our refuge and strength. Pause. Think calmly of that. The bombs burst, the guns blaze, the weapons flash. God is our refuge and strength. Pause and think calmly of that. In other words, what the psalmist is saying throughout the psalm is, in the middle of all of those realities, shift your focus. Because while our focus naturally goes to the trouble, don't let it stay there forever. Shift it to the God who is above and beyond it all. In fact, there is at the heart of this psalm an interesting statement. You might have noticed it says, there is a river that makes glad the city of God. It's talking about Jerusalem. If you've been to Jerusalem, you know one thing: Jerusalem has no river. So listen to what Dana Gould, an author writing on this psalm, says. The city of God was Jerusalem, which had no river like other capitals. Babylon was built on the Euphrates, Egypt alongside the Nile, and Rome on the Tiber. The stream that refreshes Jerusalem is the presence of the living God. Pause and think about that. Focus on that. In the middle of it all, God is saying, may I have your attention, please? You're fighting battles you can't win. Maybe it's time to decide which ones are yours and which ones aren't. Southern California traffic, it's a battle you can't win. I've tried. Zipping in and out of cars, trying to get ahead, trying to make it, and then find, I just passed all those cars. How are they up here already? It's a battle you can't win. I finally decided quite some time ago, I got to stop fighting this battle. I often intentionally, not always, don't see me whiz by and say, you're not doing it, and not always, but I often choose the slow lane and slow down. Choose some different content or some silence. You know what I discovered? I discovered that over quite a period of time and many hours, I memorized the book of Ephesians, much of it behind the wheel of my car. You can't win that battle. Stop trying to fight it. Shift your focus. Be still. Know who God is. DC politics, you can't win that battle. I can tell you that. That shouting match you had with your brother-in-law at the last family gathering, where now family is split in two and nobody will talk to each other, how much did that fix DC politics? Tell me. That much. You can't fix that. So make some choices to reshift some of the focus to better content. Maybe it would be worth considering unfollowing some people who are angry, strident voices whose main objective is to hook you in and get all your attention on them. Maybe it's time to be still. Put down the weapons. Focus on God. When the ground shakes, the thunder rolls, the lightning flashes, and the waves swell, nature is particularly frightening. So, remember Jesus in the boat. Master, don't you care? Everything is about to cave in and swamp and sink them. And then Jesus stands. This is a great image to bear in mind, that a day will come when he will stand again in our boat, when he will stand and say, peace, be still, and know that I am God. Maybe that's worth our attention. When the world, like the world of the psalmist, is catastrophic cacophony, maybe it's time to hear the invitation. May I have your attention, please? And to say, yes, God, you've got it.